Osama bin Laden. At the pinnacle of infamy stands Osama bin Laden, a name that forever changed the course of world history and redefined the very concept of international terrorism. Added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 1999, bin Laden's presence on the roster marked a new era in American law enforcement, one where domestic crime fighting expanded into a global war against terror. Born into wealth in Saudi Arabia, bin Laden transformed from a privileged businessman into the world's most wanted terrorist. His organization, Al-Qaeda, orchestrated a campaign of violence that spanned continents and decades. The 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania served as a chilling preview of what was to come, killing hundreds of innocent people and establishing bin Laden as America's primary terrorist adversary. But it was September 11, 2001, that cemented bin Laden's position as the most notorious fugitive in FBI history. The coordinated attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon didn't just kill nearly 3,000 people, they fundamentally altered American society, foreign policy, and the global understanding of terrorism. For nearly a decade afterward, bin Laden remained the world's most hunted man, his face plastered on wanted posters from Afghanistan to Alabama. The manhunt that followed became the most expensive and extensive in human history, involving multiple nations, countless resources, and the full might of American intelligence agencies. Bin Laden was finally killed in a U.S. Navy SEAL operation in Pakistan in 2011, bringing closure to one of the darkest chapters in American history and removing the most dangerous name from the FBI's list. His legacy of terror and the global response it triggered ensures that bin Laden remains unparalleled in terms of notoriety and cultural impact among FBI fugitives. Next, we turn to a very different kind of predator, one whose charm masked unspeakable evil: Ted Bundy. Few names in criminal history evoke as much fascination and revulsion as Ted Bundy, the handsome law student who became one of America's most prolific serial killers. Added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 1978, Bundy's inclusion came not for his initial crimes, but for his audacious escape from custody and the killing spree that followed. Bundy's story reads like a nightmare masquerading as the American dream. Intelligent, articulate, and devastatingly charismatic, he possessed all the qualities society associates with success and trustworthiness. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade lurked a monster who would confess to killing at least 30 young women across multiple states, though investigators believe the actual number may be much higher. What set Bundy apart from other serial killers was not just his victim count, but his methodology and persona. He was a master manipulator who used his good looks and feigned vulnerability to lure victims. Often approaching women in public spaces, he would pretend to be injured or in distress, asking for help carrying books or loading items into his Volkswagen Beetle. This calculated deception allowed him to gain victims' trust before revealing his true, horrific intentions. His escape from custody in Colorado in 1977 demonstrated the same cunning that made him such an effective predator. After sawing through the ceiling of his jail cell, Bundy disappeared into the Colorado wilderness, eventually making his way to Florida, where he would commit some of his most heinous crimes. The Chi Omega sorority house murders at Florida State University showed that freedom had only emboldened his violent tendencies. The media coverage surrounding Bundy was unprecedented for a serial killer case. His trials were among the first to be televised, and his decision to represent himself in court provided America with the surreal spectacle of watching a mass murderer argue for his own innocence. His eventual confession to investigators, delivered just days before his execution in 1989, provided closure to countless families while simultaneously chilling the nation with details of his crimes. Bundy's cultural impact extends far beyond his criminal acts, spawning countless books, documentaries, and films that continue to examine the psychology of evil. Our next fugitive also achieved infamy through violence, but his crimes were rooted in the corrupt world of organized crime. James Whitey Bulger. The story of James Whitey Bulger represents one of the most shocking betrayals of public trust in FBI history, a tale of corruption, violence, and institutional failure that kept him on the 10 most wanted list for 12 years before his dramatic capture in 2011. Bulger's case exposed the dangerous complexities of using criminals as informants and the devastating consequences when that relationship goes terribly wrong. For decades, Bulger ruled Boston's Winter Hill Gang with an iron fist, orchestrating a criminal empire empire built on extortion, drug trafficking, and murder. But what made his story truly extraordinary was his simultaneous role as an FBI informant, a protected asset who fed information to federal agents while continuing to commit heinous crimes. This unholy alliance allowed Bulger to eliminate rivals and expand his territory while enjoying virtual immunity from prosecution. Added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 1999, Bulger had already been tipped off by his FBI handler about impending federal charges, allowing him to flee Boston with his longtime companion, Catherine Gregg. What followed was one of the longest and most expensive manhunts in FBI history, with Bulger spending 16 years as a fugitive, living quietly in Santa Monica, California, under assumed identities. The brutality of Bulger's crimes was matched only by the sophistication of his criminal operations. He wasn't just a street thug who got lucky. He was a calculated businessman who understood that violence was simply another tool for maintaining market share. His reputation for ruthlessness was so complete that mere mention of his name could resolve disputes and ensure compliance throughout Boston's underworld. The capture came through old-fashioned detective work and media attention. After years of leads going nowhere, the FBI launched a publicity campaign targeting women who might have traveled with Bulger during his years underground. The strategy worked when a former neighbor in Santa Monica recognized Catherine Gregg from the television advertisements and contacted authorities. Bulger's story inspired numerous books and the 2015 film Black Mass, starring Johnny Depp, ensuring his place in popular culture. His death in federal prison in 2018 closed the book on one of organized crime's most notorious figures, but questions about FBI accountability in his case continue to resonate. The next fugitive on our list used violence not for profit but to silence one of America's greatest voices for justice and equality, James Earl Ray. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4, 1968, stands as one of the darkest moments in American history, robbing the nation of its most eloquent voice for civil rights and racial equality. The man who pulled the trigger, James Earl Ray, became the subject of one of the FBI's most intensive manhunts, ultimately leading to his capture in London and a lifetime of controversy that continues to this day. Ray's path to infamy began long before that fateful evening in Memphis. A career criminal with a history of armed robbery and prison escapes, he seemed an unlikely candidate to change the course of American history. Yet on that April evening, positioned in a rooming house bathroom across from the Lorraine Motel, Ray fired the shot that silenced one of the 20th century's most important leaders. Added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 1968, Ray managed to evade capture for over 2 months, fleeing through Canada and eventually reaching London using false documentation. His elaborate escape plan suggested a level of sophistication that seemed inconsistent with his criminal history, fueling decades of conspiracy theories about whether he acted alone. The international manhunt for Ray captivated global attention, with law enforcement agencies across multiple countries joining the search for King's assassin. His eventual capture at London's Heathrow Airport came through careful detective work and international cooperation, but it was only the beginning of a legal saga that would span decades. What makes Ray's case particularly complex is his contradictory behavior following his arrest. Initially, he pleaded guilty to avoid the electric chair, receiving a 99-year prison sentence. However, just 3 days later, he recanted his confession and spent the rest of his life claiming innocence, alleging he was merely a pawn in a larger conspiracy. This reversal transformed him from a confessed assassin into a central figure in one of America's most enduring conspiracy theories. Ray's story took another dramatic turn when he was added to the most wanted list again in 1977 after escaping from prison with 6 other inmates. Though recaptured quickly, this second appearance on the list demonstrated that even behind bars, Ray remained a dangerous and resourceful criminal. The assassination of Dr. King and Ray's subsequent capture represent a turning point in American law enforcement's approach to protecting civil rights leaders and investigating racially motivated crimes. Our next fugitive story involves a very different kind of transformation, from victim to perpetrator. Patty Hearst. The kidnapping of Patricia Patty Hearst in 1974 began as a typical crime story, but evolved into one of the most psychologically complex and culturally significant cases in FBI history. The granddaughter of media mogul William Randolph Hearst, Patty's transformation from kidnapping victim to armed revolutionary captivated the nation and introduced America to concepts like Stockholm Syndrome and brainwashing on a mass media scale. On February 4, 1974, members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA, LA, burst into Hearst's Berkeley apartment, dragging the 19-year-old college student into a nightmare that would define the rest of her life. Initially held in a closet and subjected to physical and psychological abuse, Hearst seemed destined to become another tragic victim of political extremism. However, what happened next defied all expectations and challenged conventional understanding of victim psychology. Within weeks of her kidnapping, audio recordings began surfacing in which Hearst denounced her family and declared her allegiance to the SLA's revolutionary cause. Adopting the nom de guerre Tanya, she announced her decision to join her captors in their war against the establishment. This dramatic transformation from victim to willing participant stunned her family and the broader American public. Added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in 1975, Hearst's inclusion marked the first time many Americans had seen a kidnapping victim become a fugitive. The incongruity of her situation, wealthy heiress turned bank robber, made her story irresistible to media outlets and the public alike. Security camera footage of Hearst wielding an assault rifle during a San Francisco bank robbery became one of the most iconic images of the 1970s. The manhunt for Hearst and her SLA compatriots dominated headlines for over a year, with law enforcement agencies struggling to understand whether they were pursuing a victim or a criminal. The complexity of her case challenged traditional notions of criminal culpability and raised profound questions about the nature of free will under extreme duress. Hearst's capture after 19 months underground led to a trial that became a national sensation. Her defense team argued that she had been brainwashed and coerced into criminal activity, while prosecutors maintained that she had willingly joined the SLA's revolutionary cause. The jury's guilty verdict reflected society's struggle to reconcile Hearst's privileged background with her criminal actions. The cultural impact of the Hearst case extended far beyond the courtroom, inspiring countless books, documentaries, and academic studies examining the psychology of captivity and coercion. Her eventual presidential pardon by Bill Clinton in 2001 provided a measure of closure to one of the most unusual chapters in FBI history. Our next fugitive represents a very different form of violence, the calculated cruelty of a serial killer targeting high-profile victims. Andrew Cunanan. The spring and summer of 1997 witnessed one of the most bizarre and terrifying killing sprees in American criminal history, as Andrew Cunanan carved a bloody path across the country that culminated in the murder of fashion icon Gianni Versace. Cunanan's placement on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in June 1997 came after a series of murders that seemed to follow no logical pattern, creating terror in gay communities and high society circles from Minneapolis to Miami Beach. Cunanan's background provided few clues to the violence that would make him infamous. Intelligent and charming, he moved easily through affluent gay social circles, presenting himself as a wealthy sophisticate despite having no obvious source of income. His ability to reinvent himself and create elaborate fictional personas allowed him to manipulate and deceive those around him, skills that would later serve him during his months as a fugitive. The killing spree began in Minneapolis with the brutal murder of Jeffrey Trail, followed quickly by the death of David Madsen. What started as what appeared to be crimes of passion evolved into something far more sinister as Cunanan moved across the country, leaving a trail of victims who seemed connected only by their association with him or their presence in his path of destruction. The murder that brought Cunanan international notoriety occurred on July 15, 1997, when he shot Gianni Versace on the steps of the designer's Miami Beach mansion. The killing of such a high-profile figure transformed what had been a regional manhunt into a global media sensation. Versace's status as a fashion icon and celebrity magnet meant that his murder resonated far beyond typical criminal cases. The manhunt for Cunanan intensified after Versace's murder, with law enforcement agencies coordinating efforts across multiple jurisdictions while media attention reached fever pitch. The killer's ability to remain hidden in plain sight, despite being one of America's most recognizable fugitives, demonstrated both his cunning and the challenges facing investigators in high-profile cases. The pursuit ended just 8 days after Versace's murder, when Cunanan was found dead on a Miami houseboat, having taken his own life with the same gun used to kill the fashion designer. His suicide robbed investigators of the opportunity to understand his motives and left countless questions unanswered about the psychology behind his killing spree. Cunanan's story gained renewed cultural relevance through the acclaimed FX series American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, which explored the complex social dynamics and psychological factors that may have contributed to his violent rampage. From a killer who targeted the famous, we turn to a revolutionary who became famous herself through her fight for justice and equality. Angela Davis. The case of Angela Davis represents one of the most politically charged and controversial inclusions in FBI 10 Most Wanted history, highlighting the complex intersection of activism, violence, and justice during one of America's most turbulent decades. Added to the list in 1970, Davis became the third woman and first African-American woman to appear on the FBI's Most Wanted roster, but her case differed dramatically from typical criminal fugitives. Davis's path to the FBI's Most Wanted list began with her involvement in radical politics and her association with the Black Panther Party and Communist Party USA during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. As a philosophy professor at UCLA, she had already attracted FBI attention for her political activities and inflammatory rhetoric, making her a target of government surveillance long before any criminal charges were filed. The incident that landed Davis on the Most Wanted list occurred on August 7, 1970, when 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson entered a Marin County courthouse during a trial involving his older brother, Black Panther George Jackson. Armed with weapons that were registered to Davis, Jonathan Jackson took the judge, prosecutor, and 3 jurors hostage in an apparent attempt to negotiate his brother's release. The escape attempt ended in a shootout that left 4 people dead, including Jonathan Jackson and Judge Harold Haley. Davis's connection to the weapons used in the courthouse incident led to charges of conspiracy, kidnapping, and murder, making her one of the most wanted criminals in America. However, many viewed these charges as politically motivated, arguing that Davis was being prosecuted for her beliefs rather than her actions. This perception transformed her case from a simple criminal matter into a cause célèbre for civil rights activists worldwide. The manhunt for Davis was complicated by the widespread support she enjoyed in radical political circles. Underground networks helped her evade capture for 2 months before she was finally arrested in New York City. During her time as a fugitive, Davis became an international symbol of resistance against American racism and political oppression. Her trial in 1972 became a media spectacle and political rallying point, with supporters organizing Free Angela Davis campaigns across the country and around the world. The all-white jury's decision to acquit Davis of all charges was seen as a vindication of her claims that she had been unfairly targeted for her political beliefs. Davis's acquittal and subsequent career as an academic and activist ensured her place in civil rights history, with numerous books and films documenting her case and its significance in the struggle for racial equality. Her story represents the complex relationship between political activism and criminal justice during one of America's most divisive periods. Our next fugitive channels political extremism in a very different direction, using violence to advance a radical anti-government agenda. Eric Robert Rudolph. The 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta were meant to showcase American hospitality and achievement to the world, but Eric Robert Rudolph's bomb in Centennial Olympic Park forever linked the Games with domestic terrorism. Rudolph's 5-year stint on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list from 1997 to 2003 represented one of the longest manhunts for a domestic terrorist in modern American history. Rudolph's campaign of terror extended far beyond the Olympic bombing, encompassing a series of attacks on abortion clinics and a gay nightclub that killed 3 people and injured over 100 others. His targets reflected a radical anti-government, anti-abortion ideology that viewed violence as a legitimate tool for advancing his extremist beliefs. The carefully planned nature of his attacks and his ability to remain hidden for years demonstrated a level of sophistication that made him particularly dangerous. The Olympic Park bombing on July 27, 1996, killed 1 person and injured 111 others, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be a celebration of international unity and athletic achievement. The attack occurred during a late-night concert, with Rudolph's pipe bomb hidden in a backpack beneath a bench in the crowded park. The explosion sent shrapnel flying through the crowd, creating scenes of chaos and terror that were broadcast around the world. Rudolph's ability to evade capture for over 5 years became legendary among law enforcement circles and survival enthusiasts alike. Using his extensive knowledge of the North Carolina wilderness and survival skills honed during military service, he managed to live off the land while one of the largest manhunts in FBI history searched for him. The rugged terrain of the Appalachian Mountains provided perfect cover for someone determined to remain hidden. The manhunt for Rudolph involved hundreds of federal agents and cost millions of dollars, but his familiarity with the mountainous terrain and possible assistance from local sympathizers kept him ahead of investigators. His ability to strike and then disappear into the wilderness earned him comparisons to legendary outlaws and folk heroes, though his victims' families saw nothing romantic about his crimes. Rudolph's capture in 2003 came not through sophisticated investigation, but through the simple act of scavenging for food. A rookie police officer in Murphy, North Carolina, spotted him digging through a dumpster behind a grocery store and recognized him from wanted posters. The anticlimactic end to such an extensive manhunt highlighted the role that chance often plays in law enforcement. His subsequent confession and life sentence provided closure to his victims' families while offering insights into the mindset of domestic terrorists. Rudolph's case remains a touchstone for understanding how extremist ideologies can motivate individuals to commit acts of mass violence against innocent civilians. We now turn to a groundbreaking case that shattered gender barriers in the world's most exclusive criminal club, Ruth Eisenman Scheer. Ruth Eisenman Scheer holds the dubious distinction of being the first woman ever added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, achieving this unwanted milestone in 1968 for her role in one of the most bizarre kidnapping cases in American criminal history. Her crime and subsequent manhunt challenged conventional assumptions about female criminals while introducing America to a new level of calculated cruelty. The case that made Eisenman Scheer infamous began with the kidnapping of Barbara Jane Mackle, a wealthy college student from Florida, in December 1968. Working with her partner Gary Stephen Christ, Eisenman Scheer orchestrated a plan that went far beyond simple ransom demands, involving the burial of their victim alive in a makeshift underground bunker while they negotiated for payment. The methodical nature of the crime demonstrated a level of planning and psychological manipulation that shocked investigators and the public alike. Mackle was buried in a fiberglass box equipped with minimal life support systems, creating a race against time that added urgency to the ransom negotiations. The victim's ordeal lasted 83 hours underground, during which she faced the very real possibility of suffocation or dehydration. Eisenman Scheer's role in the kidnapping extended beyond mere assistance, as investigators determined she was an equal partner in planning and executing the crime. Her willingness to participate in such a psychologically brutal act challenged stereotypes about female criminals and demonstrated that women could be just as capable of extreme violence and manipulation as their male counterparts. The manhunt for Eisenman Scheer lasted several months, with the FBI tracking leads across multiple states while she attempted to blend into normal society. Her capture came through traditional detective work and the gradual narrowing of possible hiding places, but her time as a fugitive had already secured her place in criminal history. Her inclusion on the 10 Most Wanted list broke new ground for the FBI and reflected changing perceptions about women's roles in serious crimes. The media attention surrounding her case helped establish the template for how law enforcement and journalists would cover female criminals in subsequent decades. Following her capture and conviction, Eisenman Scheer was deported to her native Honduras after serving her prison sentence, effectively ending her criminal career in the United States. Her case remains a landmark in the history of the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list and continues to be studied by criminologists interested in understanding female participation in violent crimes. Our next case involves a mystery that has confounded investigators for decades, representing one of the FBI's most enduring unsolved cases. William Bradford Bishop Jr. The case of William Bradford Bishop Jr. represents one of the FBI's most perplexing unsolved mysteries, a tale of family annihilation followed by a disappearance so complete that investigators still seek answers nearly 5 decades later. Added to the 10 Most Wanted list in 2014, Bishop's delayed inclusion came after decades of investigation failed to locate the former State Department employee who allegedly murdered his entire family in 1976. Bishop's background provided few clues to the violence that would make him notorious. A highly educated diplomat with a successful career in international relations, he appeared to be living the American dream in suburban Maryland. His work with the State Department had taken him around the world, providing him with the international connections and survival skills that may have aided his decades-long evasion of justice. The murders that destroyed Bishop's family occurred on March 1, 1976, when investigators believe he bludgeoned to death his wife, 3 sons, and elderly mother in their Bethesda home. The methodical nature of the killing suggested a level of planning and calculation that contradicted Bishop's reputation as a mild-mannered civil servant. The use of a sledgehammer as the murder weapon indicated a particularly brutal and personal form of violence. What makes the Bishop case particularly unusual is the elaborate cover-up that followed the murders. After killing his family, Bishop loaded their bodies into his station wagon and drove to a remote area of North Carolina, where he burned the remains in a makeshift funeral pyre. This effort to destroy evidence demonstrated a level of criminal sophistication reputation that contradicted his clean-cut image. The manhunt for Bishop has spanned multiple decades and continents, with investigators pursuing leads from Europe to Central America. His diplomatic background and language skills provided him with numerous advantages in evading capture, including knowledge of international travel procedures and potential safe havens around the world. Age-progressed photographs showing what Bishop might look like today have generated thousands of tips, but none have led to his capture. The possibility that he died years ago remains open, but the FBI continues to pursue leads based on the theory that he might still be alive and living under an assumed identity. Bishop's case has generated extensive media coverage and spawned numerous theories about his whereabouts and motivations. The enduring mystery of his disappearance ensures his place among the FBI's most notorious unsolved cases. From an unsolved mystery, we turn to a case notable for its unprecedented longevity on the FBI's most wanted list: Victor Manuel Garina. Victor Manuel Garina holds the remarkable distinction of spending more time on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list than any other individual in the program's history, remaining on the roster for an unprecedented 32 years from 1984 to 2016. His case represents not just a single crime, but a decades-long game of cat and mouse that highlights the challenges of pursuing fugitives with strong ideological motivations and international support networks. Garina's path to infamy began with his employment as a security guard for Wells Fargo in Connecticut, where he had access to one of the company's most secure facilities. On September 12, 1983, he used his position and knowledge of security procedures to execute what was then the largest cash robbery in U.S. history, stealing approximately $7 million from the company's West Hartford depot. The robbery itself demonstrated careful planning and intimate knowledge of Wells Fargo's operations. Garina injected his two co-workers with a sedative, bound them with tape, and systematically looted the facility's cash reserves. His ability to overcome multiple security measures and escape without detection initially made investigators believe they were dealing with an inside job, which proved to be exactly the case. What elevated Garina's case from a simple robbery to a matter of national security was the suspected destination of the stolen funds. Intelligence agencies believed the money was funneled to Los Macheteros, a Puerto Rican separatist organization committed to achieving independence through armed resistance. This political dimension transformed Garina from a common criminal into a terrorist financier. The manhunt for Garina has taken investigators across the Caribbean and into Central America, following a trail of evidence suggesting he fled to Cuba shortly after the robbery. The Cuban government's refusal to extradite suspected terrorists to the United States created a safe haven for Garina and complicated efforts to bring him to justice. Garina's record-setting tenure on the most wanted list became a source of frustration for law enforcement and fascination for the public. His ability to remain hidden for over 3 decades, despite being one of America's most wanted criminals, demonstrated the limitations of international law enforcement cooperation in politically sensitive cases. His removal from the list in 2016 came not because he was captured, but because the FBI decided to focus resources on more current threats. The decision highlighted the practical challenges of maintaining decades-long manhunts and the need to prioritize limited investigative resources. Next, we examine the man who launched this entire program and established the template for America's most wanted criminals: Thomas James Holden. Thomas James Holden occupies a unique place in criminal history as the first person ever added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, earning this distinction when the program launched on March 14, 1950. His case established the template for what would become one of America's most recognizable law enforcement tools, proving the program's effectiveness when he was captured just 4 months after his inclusion. Holden's criminal career spanned multiple decades and included a variety of offenses that demonstrated both his versatility as a criminal and his willingness to escalate to violence when necessary. His partnership with Francis Keating in a series of mail robberies during the 1920s and 1930s established him as a professional criminal capable of planning and executing sophisticated heists. The crime that ultimately landed Holden on the inaugural Most Wanted list involved the murder of his wife and her 2 brothers in a domestic dispute that turned deadly. This personal violence marked a departure from his previous crimes and demonstrated the dangerous unpredictability that made him a priority target for law enforcement agencies. What made Holden particularly suitable as the first most wanted fugitive was his extensive criminal history combined with his current status as a murder suspect. The FBI needed a case that would capture public attention and demonstrate the program's potential effectiveness, and Holden's combination of notoriety and immediate danger made him an ideal candidate. The media attention surrounding Holden's inclusion on the list proved that the FBI's gamble on public cooperation would pay off. Newspapers across the country featured his photograph and details of his crimes. creating a level of public awareness that traditional law enforcement methods could not achieve. Holden's capture in 1951 validated the Most Wanted program's effectiveness and established the template for future cases. His arrest came as a direct result of public recognition generated by his inclusion on the list, proving that citizen cooperation could be a powerful tool in law enforcement. The success of Holden's case encouraged the FBI to continue and expand the program, leading to the capture of countless fugitives over the subsequent decades. His status as the original most wanted fugitive ensures his place in law enforcement history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.